Many rituals also provide space for adolescents to provide a public statement about who they are and what they believe. So, as well as internalizing the beliefs of the society, these rituals provide another opportunity for adolescents to find their identity. Such public demonstrations also provide evidence that parents need no longer hold themselves responsible, nor be held responsible by other members of the community for their children in the same way as before. Key point: rites of passage and coming of age ceremonies signal an adolescent's new status to the community, to the adolescent themselves, and to their parents. As if the question, who am I, wasn't overwhelming enough, there is also the matter of who do I want to be? And for some adolescents, the horizon of possible identities is wider than others. In chapter 15, we will pick up the idea and examine it more deeply from cross-cultural perspectives. Creativity revisited. Many people have noted that throughout history, adolescents have had a track record of rebelliousness and of leading change in popular culture. In the early 19th century, young people adopted a sexy, scandalous and transgressive dance called the waltz and became obsessed with an equally outrageous form of entertainment called the novel. In the 20th century, it was rock and roll, hip-hop, miniskirts, tattoos and tracksuits. Gopnik 2016. Teenagers have always been wellsprings of logistic innovation too, from coining new words to, like, different ways of speaking. These trends usually follow a predictable pattern. The previous generation balk at the change and be appalled by the erosion of public standards. The ideas then spread through society and become the new normal as adolescents grow up to become the adults and the next generation, and finally hardly anyone can remember what the moral panic was about. Adolescence creativity goes well beyond pop culture, however, and can include startling technical innovations. Rawlings 2022. The 2019 Google Science Fair introductory meeting was won by Fionn Ferreira from Cork, Ireland, who, aged 18, invented a non-harmful method of extracting microplastics from water using vegetable oil and rust powder. In 2002, in Mastala village, Malawi, 14-year-old William Kamkwaba built an electricity generating windmill by using an old bicycle frame with plastic pipes to create a turbine. It powered the family radio and removed the need for kerosene generators, which provide more expensive, lower quality electricity. In Port-au-Prince, Haiti, Wens Dimash, age 18, invented the electric-based contactless hand washing system for his local community, powered by a mobile phone battery that can be removed for recharging. In Herat, West Afghanistan, a team of adolescent women known as Afghan Dreamers, aged 14 to 17, built a prototype mechanized ventilator using an engine and battery parts from old cars and the motorcycle chain. Approved by researchers at MIT and Harvard University, the ventilators cost a fraction of the market price of commercially made ones and avoid the need for health workers to manually pump airbags. Key point: adolescents have been drivers of cultural change and innovation throughout history. The creativity of these teenagers should not be taken for granted, given ample time and materials. Most of us could not invent a microplastic extractor, electricity generating windmill, or a mechanized ventilator What psychological and social factors explain this adolescent appetite for innovation and change? Let's begin by revisiting why creativity is more limited in young children. In Chapter 9, we saw how difficult tool innovation was for younger children. Even 11-year-olds were outsmarted by Betty the Crow on the hook task. Young children's capacity for innovation was constrained by two factors. First, they are prodigious imitators of other people's behaviour. This is our species superpower, allowing us to pass on the vast body of cultural knowledge, including language, morals, rights, technologies, and customs from one generation to the next. But nothing changes if nothing changes, and imitation is the opposite of innovation. Teenage rebellious attitude is disregarded for tradition, loosen the slavish devotion to norms, and create space where new ideas can take hold and disrupt the old order. There is delicate balance here, though. Too much innovation risks abandoning the accumulated medical, ecological, and technical know-how of previous generations that have served people well. Not enough innovation, and society stagnates with no innovation to plug into the ratchet effect. We wouldn't have a fresh idea to address new environmental and societal challenges. In section 12.2, we saw how people differ on 5 personality dimensions, as well as individual differences in personality. These dimensions have a greater or lesser influence over us in different points of our lives, regardless of the difference between people. Openness to new experiences is at its highest level during adolescence compared with any other phase of life. Innovation is by definition something that relatively few people do to begin with. Therefore, an adolescent peer group that is more likely to adopt a wider variety of unusual behaviours can ensure that more eccentric innovations get preserved and passed on. We will explore the role of the adolescent peer group in more details in the next chapter. The second factor that stops innovation is that they simply haven't had time to build up the repertoire of know what and know how required to produce something better than what has gone before. Designing a microplastic extractor, an electricity generating windmill, or a mechanised ventilator that works not only requires a flash of insight, but also a vast amount of experience with materials, physics, forces, and problem solving. This kind of knowledge accumulates throughout our lives, so we might expect that the older we get, the more creative we become. However, by late or to older adulthood, changes in openness dimension of our personalities work against this. On average, compared with adolescence, older adulthood is characterized by more resistance to change, lower risk-taking and reward-seeking, and preference for familiarity over the new. This puts teenagers in the Goldilocks zone for creativity, enough life experience to create innovation that can work, and not too much conservatism, which would mean they would never try to innovate in the first place. Key points. Several cognitive and social factors make adolescence a period of creativity. Today, many adolescents are leading change on one way of the most important issues of our time, the environmental degradation of our planet, figure 12.3. This is perhaps both fitting and tragic, as children themselves have often been the first to suffer its negative consequences, including food shortages, economic hardships, and forced migration, with those from low-income families especially vulnerable. Globally, it is estimated that 20,000 children are uprooted from their homes every day as a result of climate change, and more than a quarter of all children's deaths worldwide are attributable to pollution, with approximately 570,000 children under 5 years of age dying each year as a result. UNICEF 2023, WHO 2017. Children are especially at risk from toxins in the environment because of their increased brain plasticity, immature immune systems, and rapid growth. One study found that in highly polluted Mexico City, 57% of children had white matter lesions in the prefrontal areas of their brain, compared with 8% of children in less polluted polyethylene. The children from Mexico City also performed more poorly on a variety of cognitive tests. GarDjinn et al. 2011. In the UK, 74% of 11 to 16-year-olds are worried about the effects of climate change on the future. UNICEF 2013. Figure 12.3. In 2018, aged 15, Greta Thunberg started spending her Fridays outside the Swedish Parliament, calling for action on climate change and holding up a sign that read Skolstergic for Klimatet, School Strike for Climate. Soon after, millions of students joined in similar protests in their cities around the world under the banner Friday for Future. Later that year, Thunberg delivered an address to the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and she continues to challenge world leaders to mitigate climate change. Talking point. Whether adolescents or anyone else can innovate our way out of our current environmental situation remains to be seen. What do we know is that required monumental shift in public attitude and behaviour has happened before in recent history. At the beginning of the 20th century, the idea of giving voting rights to women was generally seen in the USA as outrageous. The idea of female cabinet secretary or Supreme Court justice was ridiculous, and homosexuality was taboo, subject that could not be openly be discussed. Harari 2015. The fact that these issues have been seen vast change in such a short period of time gives us hope that we will look back on environmentalism in the same way. Another reason to be hopeful is that adolescents have often been some of the most active participants in these changes, a trend that continues today on issues as diverse as civil rights and gun ownership. Adolescents themselves stand to benefit, not least because of the world they will inherit, but also because they report that their mental health and identity are positively impacted by the sense of personal control and belonging that the environmental activism can bring. Evans et al. 2005. Teenagers sometimes get a bad reputation as uncommunicative, awkward, and volatile. There is certainly no shortage of reason to wake up worried. Economic crisis, climate change, and recently global pandemic. Yet despite these external problems, as well as the internal challenges of identity development, adolescents continuously prove themselves to be innovative, resilient, and optimistic. Young adults sometimes struggle in the course of their transition to adulthood, yet they are also thriving in many ways, and they are remarkably hopeful about how their adult lives will turn out. Their optimism and determination should give us hope too. Arnett and Schwab, 2012. Summary. Identity development is an important part of adolescence in which young people work out who they are, what they believe in, and how they will present themselves to others. Genetic and environmental influences are significant factors in explaining the differences between people's personalities. Estimates of heritability increase through lifespan. Heritability is caused by many genes, each of which contributes to a small effect. The environment shows some degrees of heritability too. Social interaction with friends and family shapes adolescents' identity by supporting their identity exploration, fostering a sense of personal autonomy and highlighting uniqueness from others. Rituals that mark the passage into adulthood, rites of passage, and coming of age ceremonies are common features of many societies. Across cultures, key indicators of adulthood are taking personal responsibility for your actions and independence from others. Rites of passage and coming of age ceremonies signal the adolescent's new status to the community, to the adolescents themselves and their parents. Adolescents have been drivers of cultural change and innovation throughout history. Several cognitive and social factors make adolescence a period of creativity.